I wouldn't be surprised if Elon makes it to Mars by 2026 or so.
That's fast.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to go really aggressively, and I think once they get off the launch pad, it's going to go very fast.
It takes a long time to tweet from Mars, Nathan.
CEO and co-founder.
I'm still the founding partner of Foveation.
Now I'm here, co-founder.
I got to know Nathan Mintz when we were at Stanford together. He had strong opinions then. He has strong opinions now, and he's doing amazing things. The other day, I was with a friend who works for Elon Musk. I was asking him where he's seeing the top talent in mechanical engineering and hardware. And he mentioned a couple companies, and he said, there's one where there's just amazing people. It's really small, though. You probably haven't heard of it. It's called Spartan Radar. Spartan is actually the name of Nathan's company. Let's learn why Nathan's attracting such top talent and how he's pushing forward the possibility frontier in terms of radar and autonomous vehicles. Nathan Mintz. Nathan, thank you for joining us.
Pleased to be here, Joe. Thank you.
Nathan and I knew each other at Stanford. We started a nonprofit together called California Common Sense in 2010, which led to some great things coming out of that, which we figured out. You're the founder of Epirus, which we have talked about before on the podcast. You were an early CEO there. You're now the founder and CEO of Spartan.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, and I just want to say thank you for talking me into taking this entrepreneurial journey with you.
Well, it's great to get to spend time with you in front of everyone. We are currently in a state that I will not admit that I am in. You are still based here outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah, for the time being, yes.
Been visiting for a couple days and getting out before they can get me. Nathan, you've built some amazing teams here. One of my favorite stories about you is I was catching up with one of Elon Musk's talent people, and they mentioned, of course, Epirus, which they knew I was involved with. And I said, where else are you seeing really great talent going? And they mentioned this little new company called Spartan. You probably haven't heard of it, but that's another one on our radar, which is ironic because you've started both of those.
Company, yeah.
And it's a radar company. And Nathan, but first let's go back a little bit. You actually ran for California Assembly in the past. Is that right?
Yeah, about 13 years ago, and then I was a glutton for punishment, so I tried it again in 2012.
And you got crushed twice.
The first time, actually, we thought I was going to win until about 3 a.m., and then Venice reported.
Really? So it's closer than I realized.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I lost by 7%.
That's not too bad.
I mean, yeah, and what the funny part of it is the first 5 hours of the night, I was winning by about 4,500 votes, and then it went to 3,000 and 1,500.
And the suckers in Venice Beach just finished you off.
Yeah, and I was getting calls from everybody in Sacramento. I can't believe you pulled this off. And it just turned out it was where they were counting first. So everything south of the airport, I won by 5,000 votes. Everything north of the airport, I lost by 15,000.
What does an assemblyman make, by the way? How much would you have been paid?
A heck of a lot. Probably comparable to a startup CEO. I don't know, about 95,000 a year or something.
Guessing you're making a little more than that. Now, Nathan,
I hope so.
A successful entrepreneur. But so you would have been making $95,000 in Sacramento, probably still failing to get much done given how Sacramento works. I mean,
yeah.
But what did you learn from that? What did you learn from running?
I'll tell you, raising money in an uphill race was great practice for fundraising in the current environment for VC and startups.
You learned how to raise money. What else do you learn about politics? So give us some insights on that.
Well, one thing I learned is that Sacramento is basically locked into a number of special interests who pretty much call the shots in the state, and the assemblymen, mostly on the majority side, but some on the minority side, show up and they get their voting card, and it's you're going to vote this way on these bills, and to a certain extent, a certain amount of dissent is allowed. But if they get too vocal, they'll find themselves kicked off of the right committees, and they won't get the war chest that gives them the influence they want.
So you're not an optimist on Sacramento. You're not going to have big changes there soon.
I just don't see it. I think that until the voters in the state demand change and are willing to be open-minded about who brings that change, rather than just sticking to certain political labels of Democrat or Republican, I think you're going to have real trouble making any reforms. I'll just throw out one thing that I read on Twitter the other day. The state has spent $20 billion on homeless services in the last 5 years. $20 billion. The number of homeless people in the state's gone up 20% in that time.
Well, it makes sense. You spend more money, you encourage something. But anyway,
right.
This American Optimist. Let's talk about, before we go into the optimism that I want to ask, you did also in your career work for Raytheon, work for Boeing. You did some amazing things at these places. I think you probably have some patents for things you created there.
Yeah, I had about 6 there and then a couple from Epirus along the way. It was a great place to get my feet wet and learn the ropes. And I was a radar systems engineer, and I worked on electronic warfare systems for about 15 years. Got to fly around in a test plane. Got to go to all sorts of places that you generally don't see that I still can't talk about.
So there were some real positives working there. You learned a lot. A lot of people complain these companies are inefficient. They're doing things cost plus, but there's also some real talent there as well in certain areas.
I would say it's a great place to start your career. You spend the first 5 years there, especially if you don't just stay on one program. You get into a development environment, you work on a few different things and see a few different disciplines. That frictionless ability to kind of move from program to program in the matrix organizations really helps you build up a multidisciplinary approach, which is great for systems engineers.
That's a more positive take than I've heard. And there's not too many people I know who are great systems engineers who've went to these companies. You're obviously an exception there.
I like to think so, but I've met better.
There've been some good people there.
Some of them I hired for our companies, actually.
What are some of the structural issues these companies face? Like, why aren't they solving all the problems that some of the new startups are solving?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the biggest issue they face is that they kind of wait around for the government to tell them what to build, rather than going out there and trying to invent new solutions for the problems. And the government does things along a structured approach. They used to call it the Klinger Cohen approach, or
the Klinger Cohen approach.
Klinger Cohen was the name of the act that set it out with the DoD architectural framework and various milestone A, milestone B, analysis of alternatives, all these different contracts that go for 10 or 15 years. And by the time they arrive at a solution, it's obsolete already because they've taken so long thinking about it and sort of gradually, incrementally funding it, as opposed to what we did at Epirus and others have done at other startups, where they've come in and said, you know what, we have a way to solve this problem. We're going to run as fast as we can in sprints and iterate rapidly to get to what we feel is the right solution. And that requires taking a risk.
You're basically building something before they've said they're willing to pay for it because you're so confident that it's just so much better that they will ultimately pay for it and you'll make money.
That's exactly right. And the big companies just don't want to do that. And the stakes are high. If you're a middle manager or a junior executive at one of these companies and you go below $50 million on something no customer is going to buy, you're going to get cashiered. And next thing you know, you're going to be doing sustainability support in Alabama or something. Not to say that, not that there's anything wrong with Alabama, but
there is something wrong with sustainability support, though, in many cases.
Well, yeah. It's. I struggle to find examples of punitive assignments, but yeah, that's the underlying problem is that in big companies like that, you own none of the success and you pay for all of the downside risk. So there's really no incentive for you to take a risk, whereas in startups, it's the inverse.
No, and it makes sense. At Palantir, we also were spending tens of millions of dollars on something we were very confident in well before there's any suggestion they were going to pay for it. So let's go to Epirus first. I've been lucky to be involved with you in various things. I'm an investor in your current company. We built Epirus together. You were kind of one of the key early guys at the very beginning there, putting it together. Like how'd you put Epirus together? Where did that come from?
So part of it was I was prompted by an email from you that said, hey, we just brought in a new partner, John. He's interested in starting a defense vertical. Do you have any ideas? And it happened to be around the same time that Gatwick which is an airport in London, was shut down for 25 hours by drones.
Yeah.
And nobody could figure out why. So I was working in business development at Boeing at the time, competitive intel. They used to bring me in to tell them what the other guys were going to bid. And I looked at it and said, well, what's going on here? Why is this so hard? Like, we can shoot down a missile going Mach 7 over the pole, but we can't, find a drone at an airport. And it turns out that our sensors during the Cold War, we were all focused on stuff flying in high and fast, not slow and low, which is where drones come in, right? And so there had been a study published that showed there were 200 different systems for counter UAS, and 90% of them were crappy jammers that somebody built in their garage for like $40,000 and didn't work. I saw one system that did work, and it was this huge electromagnetic pulse system that was, the size of multiple shipping containers. And I said, well, that's perfect because it doesn't care what the drone's doing or what comm channel it's on or whatever. It just fries the electronics. The trouble is it's $25 million. And so it got me thinking, and I said, I bet you with solid state, with gallium nitride, we could get those same field levels.
Yeah, because gallium nitride's only been possible to use for 10 or 15 years. And
right.
Then you and Bo And the team also figured
Yeah.
out you can use AI on chips to get the power to hit it faster, which seems to be a big part of it.
Exactly. And I called Bo and he said, I had the exact same thought. And so we set out with how do we do this in a white glove environment and really recreate this in a way where we own it entirely. And, we actually went to Walmart and found a bunch of drones and tested on that. And,
I remember.
Yeah.
What were some of the initial challenges you didn't expect?
well, let's see, about 2 months into us getting the company going, we got a notice from our landlord that we were subleasing that we had to move in less than 30 days. And
Well, you were doing some scary defense things in his building.
yeah, he probably didn't appreciate that. I think we were replaced with people making yoga mats, actually.
Reasonable.
Yeah, and they ran the whole building. We were just running a corner of it. But so we had to find a place in the first 2 weeks to find to put the company in, and we're sitting there doing all this drone testing in like a co-working space, and it was sort of had a lot of funny looks from the bank and the
Co-working is maybe not a good place to build new weapons technology.
Yeah.
Did you get any trouble from, for example, Raytheon for having had worked there before? I remember they sent you some things. Was it ever a big scary thing or not really?
I think we did a good job of kind of keeping our meat and milk separate and making sure that we clearly delineated what was our IP along the way. Mm-hmm. And I think Raytheon, to their credit, they respect that, right? They respect that if it's on our dime and we develop it entirely on our own, they don't have a claim on what's in engineers' heads, right? I mean, our know-how is ours to keep, right?
And Nathan, what do you think about the future of Epirus? You're not running it anymore, but you have a lot of really great talent you've hired there. What's it look like?
I mean, everything I hear is absolutely amazing and great things. I mean, it's kind of funny, they brought in my old boss, Andy Lowry, who Bo and I started working for all the way 13 years ago as COO and Chief Product Officer. And Andy is really good at driving these things to scale. And his first company, RealWear, actually just did a meaningful SPAC deal, not like a vaporware SPAC like we've seen. I think they're coming out for $800 million on the exit in the augmented reality space. So the way I see it, directed energy weapons are a game changer on the battlefield. They don't have any of these magazine depth problems. The headlines right now are plagued with ammunition shortages and missile shortages, and how are we going to replenish all this? The easy solution, don't use ammunition at all. And Epirus is key to kind of breaking that wheel, if you will. And then I think on top of that, the commercial applications of high power management for telecommunications, for grid infrastructure management, even medical applications open up hundreds of billions of dollars in total available market that otherwise would be unavailable. So I mean, I'm really honored and thrilled that I got to be part of it at the beginning, and I'm really excited to see it grow over time. I think that the sky's the limit for this company.
Agreed. I think Epirus changes the future of warfare, so you should be really proud of it.
Yeah, no, it's the most exciting thing I certainly got to work on in my 17 years in defense. So,
what surprised you, Nathan, about the first time? This is the first time you were starting a company, right? You'd helped me before on things. We'd worked on stuff together. You'd been in a big company yourself for a while. What surprised you about doing a startup? Was there anything you didn't expect?
I think it's the totality of a startup CEO's job, and that you touch everything, and there's really no guidebook for the situations that you encounter. A lot of it you're going to improvise on the fly, you're going to get it wrong, and you got to be willing to basically take a punch and get up and keep going, right? Mm-hmm. And that took a little bit of adaptability. I mean, I'd been a middle manager before in aerospace, but it's a little bit different from being a middle manager in a process that's clearly defined and your roles known versus CEO of a startup where, particularly with 8 or 10 people, what you say goes.
What
right?
did you take from being a middle manager? What were the useful lessons that you think you brought to this?
Understanding how to motivate people, understanding how people are staffed effectively, how to select talent. I had a center director come to me in my first week on the job as a section manager at Raytheon and say, hey, we have this big proposal we're going after. How are you going to staff it? And just off the top of my head, I go, 36 people from the existing program. We're going to hire 6 new ones, and we'll pull 3 out of the rotation program. And he says, okay, do it. So I had to learn how to go do hiring and how to really identify who are good, who are good engineers and who are bad engineers and who are great engineers. And then finding those great engineers and really putting them in opportunities where they can grow and contribute to the organization and feel valued so they stay around.
Got it. So you got Epirus going, you guys built, you learned a lot. I know you ended up replacing yourself in some different ways, moved on to Spartan. Tell us about Spartan Radar. What inspired you to start this? It's an automotive radar company.
Yes. So Spartan, our mission is really to make the world's roads safer, for both cars, trucks, specialty vehicles, all of it, through better radar software, right? I had about a few months after I had left, stepped away from Epirus. I got a call from an old mentor of mine, Dr. Theogenes Sabatsoglu, who taught me almost everything I know about radar signal processing. And he had retired a couple of years before, was working as a consultant for a couple of automotive radar companies. And he said, Nathan, I think I've come up with a way to build an automotive radar that has 5 times the resolution with a quarter of the parts. And I go, well, that sounds intriguing. Maybe that's something that we can turn into a product. So I looked at it and said, well, maybe there's more to this. So I started diving into it, and I realized that they were still building automotive radars in a lot of respects the same ways that we had built airborne radars 30, 40 years before. Very single function devices that do one thing.
What do they do? So automotive radar, if my car's going to hit something, it goes beep, beep, beep. Is that the automotive
Right.
radar?
Yeah, it's either
what
the
else?
radar, the cameras, or the ultrasonic, depending on the range and the context.
So what else is it doing? What's automotive radar useful for?
It's for lane keeping assist, for automated emergency braking, for really tracking where you are relative to other moving objects in the
So it helps us
around
with
you.
either self-driving in some cases or in other cases with just braking or warning you about
what's
things.
called ADAS systems, automated driving assistance systems, Joe. So that's like
And those are pretty common now in a lot of cars. Huh?
ubiquitous. Yeah, it's pretty much in every car. There's probably something like 60 or 70 million radars that go out the door every year. I would say probably 60% of the cars on the road have one, at least in the forward-facing
I'll
direction.
admit something to you. I'm a distracted driver is one of the reasons I actually hire a driver almost everywhere I go. And actually it wasn't my choice. My brother and my wife basically forced me to hire a driver. And the first time I was driving, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, when this ADA thing kicked in, I was grateful for it. I think it's probably saved me twice because it's just like, you're maybe doing something you shouldn't be doing or distracted, and boom, it breaks for you. And
Yeah.
it saves you. So it is pretty cool. These things seem to work pretty well.
Yeah. So what our software does is it allows the radar that's this big, and I'm pointing to something about half the size of an iPhone, to behave like something that's the size of a large dinner plate. So it's able to basically, if you think about it just intuitively, like telescopes or lenses, radars operate on
Yep.
the same function. So you can have higher resolution.
So the proportion would usually be to the square of the
Yes.
size. And so what does that mean in practice? Like, and why does this matter? Like, why do I care? Like, are you doing something that's like a millimeter better, or is it like inches better? Or why does this matter?
So what radar does better than other sensors is it can estimate distance and velocity very accurately, but it has poor angular resolution, right? It can't tell elevation and azimuth very well. Where this becomes a problem is, like, for example, if you're trying to see a motorcyclist that's going by another car and lane splitting, or a person that's standing outside of a car door that just closed, right? These are scenarios where a car, whether it's warning you or it's actively driving the car, needs to put ample space between you and that other object for situational awareness, right?
And what does the bigger radar do? It just sees these people much better.
It sees them with higher clarity, and with it's able to distinguish those objects and separate them better. Yeah,
further away.
Yeah, further away.
In practice, give me some numbers here. Is this like you're going to see the motorcycle 20 yards away instead of 5 yards away, or like what kind of things are we talking about?
It depends. It depends on the context, but about a 4 to 5 times increase in resolution, so you can scale that in terms of distance.
So if something normally would have been detected right when it's 5 yards,
Yeah.
just passing quickly, you're going to see it for a while back.
Exactly, yeah, and also the ability to distinguish things that would otherwise kind of like fall into the background, right?
That's pretty cool. So at an intersection and stuff, you probably see what's happening much further away and who's turning and who's coming to turn and who's coming through.
The other piece of the software stack that we have is the ability to kind of do electronic foveation and to dynamic
For our listeners who did not do as well in certain areas,
I'll
of college
explain what
science,
that is.
What is foveation?
So what electronic foveation means is that we can change the radar's focus so that it can if you're turning left, it can look more to the left and focus and have a higher response rate in the direction of travel.
I knew that, by the way. I'm just asking for our listeners.
Of course. So there's that. There's the resource management piece. There's what we call radar modes, which, if you think of it, are kind of like apps in your phone, right? So the ability to look at a situation with multiple contexts and pull out new information. We have one mode that we're developing called instant acceleration detection, where in a single look we can tell if somebody's hitting the brakes, which means that automated emergency braking you talked about can kick in sooner. And if you've got a 40-ton semi-truck rolling down the road, a couple hundred milliseconds is the difference between him ending up in your back seat or him stopping just before he hits you.
Interesting.
So you really get to detect what's going on in much better ways. It seems like every big car company should want the very best stuff here. So you're just, I mean, if you become the standard, that's the best, like, is everyone starting to use you? Like, where are you in terms of people adopting this?
We have a number of customers that we're working with on both the imaging radar side and on the conventional radar side, as well as OEMs that we're in evaluation with. So some of our customers include PACCAR, Under, Valeo, Philips Connect, et cetera. We're actually working with a number of the trucking customers to try and figure out how we can put more radars around the truck, around commercial vehicles, so that
That's
they
cool.
can have fewer blind spots and more reliably stop before they hit something they're not supposed to.
That's great. And I guess it takes a while to evaluate these things. When like, how's a big car company go from meeting you, evaluating, to using it? This is still a startup. It's like a few-year process is how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so the design cycle, one of the reasons that when we came up with our business strategy for this company, that we leaned into commercial vehicles so heavily at first, is that the passenger car design cycle, depending on if you're talking about a Chinese OEM, an American OEM, European, or Japanese, can go from 2 to 10 years even, right? So we said, okay, well, we need to make revenue fast. So we took a way to package our algorithms in our own aftermarket radar and then take that into the trucking market as a product that we can sell, which we call Hoplo.
Got it. So you're selling things in aftermarket, but you're also building things in, so you can make a lot of money in 5 years with these groups.
We have at least one tier one at this point that has integrated our software into their mule vehicles, and OEMs are currently evaluating it for selection.
So one thing I want to ask is that you mentioned this earlier, you're one of the very best at finding and hiring world-class hardware engineers. You've done this now, again, acknowledged by some of the top talent people I know, and by, we could tell you're the best people as well. How do you find them? How do you distinguish good from great engineers, and how do you get them to work together?
So I kind of take an unconventional approach. One thing that I notice is really popular in Silicon Valley is like doing lots of brain teasers and stuff. I don't do anything like that. I don't think
Is that because you're not good at brain teasers?
Oh, I'm terrible at brain teasers. You know this. You graded my test when I applied for the job at
I may
Clarion.
remember this.
Actually, that was the most intimidating interview in my life.
That was super obnoxious.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you sat me down in front of Peter Thiel, and it was my first coat and tie interview. I was scared shitless. Anyway, I would say that, like, what I look for is people who have a multidisciplinary approach, and I look at their body of work, and I say, show me an example where you were faced with a problem that didn't require an in-the-box solution. It was an out-of-the-box solution that was required, and how you solve that, right? So, and that's sometimes hard to find in aerospace. You find a lot of people that have been working on mature programs where it's just update these drawings all the time, incremental changes. I look for people that have done blank sheet of paper work where it's like, okay, start with something and create something that's never been done before, and tell me how you worked through some of those trades, right? And really getting in there and understanding, having the conversation with them.
And how much is it, you must already be fishing in the right places because you have so many smart people and they have their smart friends. Like, how much is it your best people bringing in people around them and then you're evaluating it? Is that a big advantage? Or?
That's a huge part of it. You need to, when you're building an early team, you really need to look at, are these people that are going to scale? Right? Are these people that come with a team of their own? And when you recognize that maybe those wells are a little dry, it's time to bring in new people that can continue that virtuous cycle, right? But you want to create a culture of innovation. I think part of it is I'm probably a lot more tolerant of dissent in some respects than a lot of other startup founders, where I'm willing to kind of tolerate people challenging my views.
Yeah, 100%. Like, when I deal with very top talent, you have to be okay with dissent. You have to be okay with people being maybe quirky and difficult to manage and unruly and telling you you're an idiot and all this stuff, because the best people are just more difficult. Right?
Yeah, they have strong opinions, and it's your job to take all that energy and harness it into creating an unbelievable product.
Alex Karp always said our job is to manage these artists, right? You really are managing artists in our companies.
They really are artists in a lot of ways. I mean, you go look at some of the AI chip work that we did at Epirus. You look at some of the algorithm work we look at work on at Spartan. It's beautiful. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it.
And so you have a lot of the best people in the world in this area around you. Tell us, what advancements are needed to move from driver assistance to fully autonomous? How far are we away from fully autonomous vehicles?
I would say we're at least 5 years away. I think you're going to see incremental integration in various, starting with luxury car brands, where you're going to see something like Tesla full self-driving plus. In what they call various ODDs, or operational design domains, or we call them use cases in aerospace. So, like, they'll have a number of geofenced roads where you can turn it on, et cetera. The big issue that I see, though, is that so much of it is tied to basically taking a brute force big data approach, where it's let's just gather as much data as we can about the environment with sensors on board the vehicle and everything, rather than trying to use kind of logic and heuristics and kind of how humans drive. Like, I mean, you don't need to know every tree on the road. You just need to pay attention to the thing that's in front of you and the lines going down the road.
And around you and behind you.
Yeah. And so I think like the big innovation that needs to happen here is a little bit more of maybe machine common sense. I mean, like as Waymo and Cruise and others have started to deploy at scale, we've seen this a lot where like the Waymo car, kind of like, you know, my grandmother, if she's when she's confused, will drive into like a construction zone unannounced and not know how to back out of it, right? And I think we need a little bit more of kind of that machine common sense. And DARPA actually has a program called Third Wave AI that's talking about how do you introduce context and focus rather than just neural nets on top of neural nets.
There has to be some high-level heuristics around that. I think the AV thing is super interesting. I remember Google started introducing a bunch of these over a decade ago when I was living, near Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And they're pretty obnoxious, but they're pretty funny because whenever you want to get into a lane, you just can start to merge, and they were terrified of you because that's the AI algorithm. So
Yeah.
not that I would be a bully as a bad driver, but you could be a bully, and you could just like make them stop and get out of your way.
The human factors is like probably the most understated thing. And if you look at most massive engineering disasters of the last 25 years, I mean, Boeing 737 MAX comes to mind.
Yeah.
It all came down to human factors and us not accounting for how humans can behave irrationally in stressful situations. And that seems to be where the AVs are really struggling the most. Is if every car on the road was an AV, they'd probably be fine.
Oh, that'd be easy, yeah.
Right? But the problem is
I'm sure Google would love to require that at some point, but hopefully we don't allow them.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, but should people fear the AVs are going to put millions of taxi drivers and truck drivers out of a job in the next decade? This has been a recurrent theme. Like, how should we think about this transition? Is it a big deal?
I mean, right now we have a worker shortage in this country. We have 80,000. We're 80,000 truck drivers short. The median age of truck drivers in this country is approaching 50 years old.
So you're saying we desperately need AVs to still make the economy work?
Yes, and I think it's going to fill in for those, a lot of these blue collar jobs where we have a legitimate shortage right now, and particularly as population demographics change, we're going to have to fill that in.
All right. Well, it sounds like you're going to bring that about. Spartan recently closed its Series B. Mm-hmm. You're adding an office and team in Detroit, I understand. Actually,
yes.
I don't know too many people building in Detroit, but that's where the car companies are.
Yep.
But tell us about your momentum. What's next in the company?
So we're currently in ramp-up phase and going into production on our aftermarket radars. We're already deploying in pilots and betas and starting to negotiate large contracts on that, including with some marquee names. I won't disclose anything right now because I'm not sure how far along we are with it. And don't want to get myself in trouble. But we have, so we're in pilots. We're continuing our software integration into a number of different tier 1 radars and OEMs for evaluation. The Detroit office will give us the ability to put forward application engineers that can really get in there and get intimate with the customers, and also it gives us access to the large commercial vehicle crew that's there in Indiana and Ohio and stuff. We recently announced our partnership with Philips Connect, where we're going to be building radars to go around the trailer.
That's great.
Combined with cameras. And eventually we'd like, and this is why Microsoft and Wipro invested in the round, to turn those into IoT devices whereby all that turns into telematics data, which can be used for driver insurance scorecards, accident reconstruction, et cetera.
That's really impressive getting Microsoft involved in that. They're going to be a big player there. I want to ask you a little bit more about autonomy, Nathan. How should we think about the culture and economic impacts of widespread automation? Is this going to exaggerate the gap between the wealthy and the poor? Does it help the disadvantaged? Like, how do you think about this from a sociological perspective?
I think that there's always consequences to any new technology, and there's resistance to change. But I think about all the people with mobility problems in this world that if they had an autonomous vehicle, they could get everywhere they need to go and avoid being shut in and handicapped or incapacitated, right? So I look at that and I say, there's just so much in terms of grocery delivery or all the lives that could be saved. I mean, we have 8,000 people that die in truck-related accidents every year, and it's unnecessary and it's wasteful.
So it's going to help save lives, but is it going to help people who are disadvantaged in general within the economy? Is it going to hurt them?
I think that jobs are going to change. I mean, we already see it now where, 30 years ago, half the professions we have today in the tech sphere didn't exist. I mean, who knew what a machine learning engineer was? Now we have ChatGPT with prompt engineering, which is the latest thing. And I think that as technology advances, we're going to find new needs to continue to push that productivity.
No, that is what's happened so far. Is there's always been enough jobs, and like you say, there's a shortage of jobs right now. I've heard you cite a stat on the Internet of Things. You said it'll exceed 1 trillion devices by 2030. You're playing in this space. That's 100 devices per person. What's the implications of this? How's that change things?
Yeah, and that wasn't my prognostication. That was, I think, the CTO of NVIDIA made that at a DARPA conference I went to, made that prognostication. And, you're already seeing it. Your fridge, you've now got a smart fridge at home, and you have multiple devices in your car. We all have these iWatches. We're starting to, ingest pills and stuff that can tell us things about our bodies. And it's this ocean of data. And I know, like earlier in your career with big data and Palantir and stuff, you guys started to think about the implications of how you can pull that out. And when we talk about like what we're going to do with the displaced workforce from automating things, well, now we have this huge amount of data that we can turn into useful products, right? Being able to have your fridge tell you, hey, you've got something in the back that's really moldy and you better throw it out. And, oh, by the way, I ordered you a new one.
Or you might want to eat this today or tomorrow because it's going to go bad, and who knows?
Yeah, or in my case, shame me on when I want to go pull the ice cream out at 3 a.m. so that I can lose a few pounds. Right?
I already have a ring that does that magically.
I'm lucky to have that one too.
Yes, it's true.
And thank God she does. She actually tries to encourage me.
It's very positive. Nathan, we started American Optimist to push back on a lot of the cynicism and pessimism we're seeing in our country. Why should advances in autonomy make us optimistic for the future?
I think that for one thing, it means a safer future with fewer people dying in tragedies. It means a more productive future.
Thanks to our robot overlords?
Yes, thanks to our robot overlords.
Wait a second.
Yeah. Sorry, that was really funny. But no, I think that I think that the increasing amount of autonomy will free up a lot of human drudgery and make our lives safer and more productive and more fulfilling.
And, I just want to ask while I have you here, you've built some great companies. What other areas of innovation excite you the most right now? Like, what could our country look like differently in the next decade or two with new technologies?
I'm excited by space. I took your cues and I did a little bit of angel investment in a couple of space companies, and one of them was actually started by one of our co-founders at Epirus, Max Mednick, who Epsilon 3 and just trying to automate that.
Automate what?
Automate the production of space products. So they have advanced tools to help with orbital mechanics and the positioning and management of satellites and make that more effective. And
why is that exciting? People say, we should be focusing here on Earth. What's the space stuff doing? Why is it exciting to you?
Well, I think the ultimate potential is for us to extend our reach beyond just this planet and to pull resources out from other places. I mean, we're doing a lot less environmental damage if we pull ore out of the moon, for example, or we can even get things there that we can't get today, like helium-3, which we can use for nuclear fusion. I mean, it taps up. This
is actually the biggest thing that Larry Page was into when he was over about a decade ago, and we chatted with him, and he's obsessed with moving all this industry into space, and then you could do anything. It doesn't have to be as regulated. There's no environmental concerns as much. So that is
real estate's cheap up there.
Real estate, there's lots of room up there to do anything. So are we going to see that in our lifetimes? Are we going to mine asteroids in our lifetimes? Is that real?
I think so. I think it's probably more like 20 years away than 5 years away, but we're certainly trending in that direction. And
so as long as our refrigerators keep us healthy enough, then we'll be around to see this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's probably a good prognostication. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Elon makes it to Mars by 2026 or so.
That's fast.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to go really aggressively, and I think once they get off the launch pad, it's going to go very fast.
It takes a long time to tweet from Mars, Nathan. Nathan, thanks so much for joining the American Optimist today.
Thank you, Joe. Great to see you.